This is David Belem with BelemFiles.com. We provide expert analysis about national security and terrorism. For obvious reasons, I modified my voice. In episode 2, I explain why jihad chose September 11 to expand its global war into American soil. If you did not watch episode 1 yet, please do it afterwards. This is because in episode 1, I provide the basics for the analysis of terrorist attacks. Asking questions is a very important function of intelligence analysis. So, here's a question. Did the jihadist terrorists choose September 11 deliberately, or was this date selected randomly? After 17 years, most policymakers as well as the general public have not asked this question yet. In fact, very few outside the jihadist movement know the answer. I will take you now into the thought process that fuels global jihad. As I said before, to untrained eyes, terrorist attacks seem random, impulsive, senseless, and without purpose or objectives. In fact, global jihadists meticulously plan their attacks. They carefully evaluate the targets, timing, and mode of attacks. Each attack has its own unique characteristics. Analyzed together, they provide us with a forensic profile. Dates and anniversaries are important variables that characterize terrorist attacks. My phone rang a few minutes after the first plane struck the World Trade Center. "Do you think it is terrorism or not?" the man asked. "Today is September 11. Definitely terrorism," I answered. "What does a date have to do with a plane crashing into a building?" he challenged me. "This terrorist attack is 3 centuries in the making," I said. During the 17th century, the future looked bleak for the non-Muslim world. The jihadist Muslims were still thirsty for more blood, additional territories to conquer, and entire nations to subjugate. In 1683, their 2-month siege of Vienna began to take its toll on the city. Not even a single indicator suggested a break from tradition. The Muslims were confident they would continue their march just as they did for centuries before, and that soon Vienna too would fall victim to their savagery. But it was not to be. On September 11, 1683, Christian reinforcements began the final charge against the Muslim army. By the time the sun had set the next day, the Muslims were defeated. The victory of Christianity over Islam was significant because it restricted the violent expansion of Islam. In this battle, for the first time in history, Western civilization capitalized on the most important strategic advantage it had over Islam. And it is this advantage that has dictated the outcome of the Islamic conflict against Western civilization until today. I will expand on this topic in upcoming publications. On September 11, 1683, the centuries-long countdown to the demise of the Caliphate had begun. For global jihadists and Caliphate fans, September 11 of each year marks a depressing anniversary that is filled with the stinging pain of defeat and great sorrow. Jihadist strategy dictates that if they should be said on each September 11 for 318 years, then they should force this agony on their enemies too. September 11 is also a day for revenge. Since revenge is such an important aspect in Islamic and jihadist cultures, I will talk about it for a few minutes. Islamic tradition created rigid principles of revenge. Events, losses, and shame must be avenged using the most brutal means imaginable. Although this unforgiving and uncompromising principle usually calls for the revenge to be taken within 40 years after the events took place, it also allows for the revenge to be effected centuries into the future. As a result, would-be victims of vengeful acts are essentially sentenced to perpetual fear of the next cycle of retaliation. This custom of merciless vengeance provided for a powerful deterrence in the lawless traditional Islamic cultures and created the only stabilizing sense of social and political order. To this day, it is practiced in many Islamic societies, including those who live in Western democracies. Revenge is commonly used as moral justification for most of global jihad's past and current atrocities. Very often, jihadist propaganda energizes and recruits Muslims by calling to avenge the Crusaders' campaigns, which began on July 1st, 1097. Yes, you heard it right. Global jihad is still taking revenge for events that took place over 9 centuries ago. Consequently, the murder of almost 3,000 Americans on September 11, 2001 was revenge for a loss to Christian armies 318 years before in a continent on the other side of the ocean. In addition to inflicting great pain and suffering on Americans as part of its revenge, Global Jihad chose September 11 to send 3 messages to Western civilization. The first message is that the Battle of Vienna circa 1683 has not yet ended. It was simply paused for 318 years. Consequently, the Islamic jihadist defeat is not permanent. And since it is not permanent, for the jihadists, the dream of the caliphate is still alive. Indeed, the resurrection of the caliphate by ISIS in the 21st century was made possible by the political gains global jihad harvested following the September 11 attacks. It is important to know that without the September 11 attacks, there would not be ISIS or the caliphate. The second message is this. The war global jihad launched to conquer the world centuries ago is not only far from being over, but it is now resurrected in jihad's favorite form, international terrorism. And this brings us to the third message. Global jihad will never let those who do not believe in Islam live their lives peacefully. It will deliver fire, fury, and mass murder of defenseless victims. It will deny them their freedom, tolerance, and the source of happiness. Eventually, jihad plans to impose the only lifestyle it knows and permits: misery, loss, and distress. So now you know, and now you can no longer claim ignorance, because I just told you. For about 1300 years, global jihad has been fighting Western civilization. Unfortunately, jihad is winning. This is because, even after 12 centuries of conflict, Western leaders and the general public still fail to conceptualize jihadist ideology. One cannot win against an enemy one does not know. Our most effective weapon is knowledge. I expose the ideology, concepts, and tactics that make global jihad so deadly. In episode 3, I will answer a question very few had the wisdom to ask. Why did the jihadists attack the Twin Towers so early in the morning? If they delayed their attack by just 2 hours, they could have killed about 10 times more Americans. The timing was not a mistake on their part. It was chosen intentionally. So, here's the quantification. The terrorists wanted to kill as many Americans as possible, even in the millions, but at the same time, for a very specific reason, they limited the number of victims. My analysis will expose an extremely dangerous jihadist concept. To read more expert analysis about national security and terrorism, please visit our site, BelemFiles.com. Don't forget to share to social media and subscribe to our channel.